stop, Exeter.
Welcome to Next Stop Exeter. My name's Paul Nicholson, and joining us in studio today is Steve Koenig. Steve is the gentleman responsible for the redevelopment of the former Loaf Ladle space in downtown Exeter. Steve, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
Very interested to find out, me along with many other foodies here in Exeter, about what the future is for that facility.
Well, we're excited to be part of Exeter's future, and it's really not that complicated. What we're trying to do there is just the next chapter in the history of that building. It's been a successful restaurant for many, many years, and when I saw that it was available for sale, I checked into it and thought it was a logical investment. Just seemed to be a vital part of the community and a great place to put in another restaurant. When I looked into the building, I found out that there had been apartments upstairs but hadn't been rebuilt after a fire, so we went to the town and got permission to put those apartments back in place, including a third apartment where it's presently single story.
As part of that construction, is a fire protection system involved? I know we've had several establishments here in town, older facilities that didn't have fire protection systems in place at the time, and therefore have had to change the direction that they've gone in with their businesses. With this building, are you required to put in a fire protection system? Was there a fire protection system already in place?
There wasn't a fire protection system in place. We are putting a sprinkler system in the building, upgrading the water service to accommodate that, and so that's just part of the construction that we're doing right now.
So the future involves having apartments upstairs.
Right.
Is the plan to have a new restaurant downstairs?
Yes. We're talking to a number of very qualified restaurant operators now that would be evaluating what kind of format, seating, arrangement, and what kind of style a restaurant ought to be in that location. The Exeter's developed quite a bit since the Loaf Ladle was first opened.
Did that impact in some way your ability to proceed with this project in terms of knowing that a restaurant was going to come back in, knowing that I believe the town has kept a very close eye on the amount of parking available to businesses downtown? If you go and you say, well, I'm going to put a barber shop in and there's going to be 3 people in that space, perhaps they look differently at that than say, well, I plan on putting a restaurant in there where there could be 70 people in there, and people questioning where's the parking for such a space. Did that get asked of you when you went in to permit this?
Well, yeah, one of the first stops was going to the building inspector, code enforcement officer. Doug Eastman's been fantastic. He just pulled out the certificate of occupancy and said that the restaurant's, I think it's permitted for 95 or 100 seats, and so therefore whatever parking requirements are needed for that use are grandfathered into the allowed parking situation, and any apartment use that we would add there would just be deducted from whatever were allocated toward the restaurant. So there's no net change, although we're certainly aware that parking is tight and want to see that the town continues to do good planning for parking.
Now, were you allowed an investigative period before you bought the building to be able to go through and kind of peel back the layers, so to speak, to see what was going on inside the walls there? I'm probably not the first person to notice that there were some issues with the building itself. What did you find when you actually rolled up your sleeves?
We were given a fairly brief window to look into it, but we satisfied ourselves that the building was what we thought it was. Structurally, we checked it out pretty thoroughly, just poked into, really didn't need to do much to find out that the building is what it appeared to be structurally, and so there were no mysteries about what we were getting.
And when they started doing the construction work inside, did they find anything of relevance that was kind of interesting, whether it would be an old menu that fell behind a wall, or you know, something along that line? You know, I had heard the story once, somebody bought a building and converted it into a restaurant locally. This is going back a few years, but in the wall they pulled a cannonball out, which I thought was pretty incredible, but for some reason somebody put a cannonball in the wall, God knows how many hundreds of years ago. Have you had any stories like that from this?
Nothing exciting like a cannonball. We've certainly uncovered menus and various records of the Loaf Ladle over the years. The local Boy Scout troop actually was very helpful in helping us move out a lot of the junk that was in the building, as well as recovering, you know, we were auctioning off a lot of the stuff on site that benefited the Boy Scout Troop 323. So whatever people thought was of interest went
Is no
out
longer
to them.
there.
Right,
Yep.
and their cherished memories. But
So you're speaking with people about taking the space over to operate a restaurant. Does that mean currently you're only looking to basically build the framework of the interior, the idea that once someone comes to you with a concrete plan and you're able to lease the space to them, that then you would do the total fit out, or are you putting finished floors in this space and painting the walls?
we're doing a couple of layouts proposed for a restaurant that would be suited to different types of users. So the seating is upstairs and downstairs, which hadn't been in use previously. Downstairs had only been used for storage, office, and the baking. But we foresee that with the dam going away in the relative near future, that seating downstairs will be very appealing and could, depending on what the town has to say, be an area of food prep as well. So we're doing a couple of concept layouts that different restaurant tenants would be interested in adapting to their format.
I have never been downstairs. Is there exposed rock downstairs? Is it brick downstairs? What do the walls look like downstairs?
It's a combination of stone foundation along Water Street and some brick. The side is open right below the Great Bridge, where we're putting in 5 windows that'll look out on the river.
And so there isn't any plans as it relates to putting a deck outside, perhaps?
Well, there's a deck out there now, 2 levels of deck that we're really not touching at all, other than to renovate it, make sure it's safe.
Understood. I haven't seen anybody out on the deck, so I forgot all about them. I drive by there so often. So you're talking to several different groups that are potentially interested in opening a restaurant back there. What are you telling them in terms of a schedule that, we believe we're going to be ready to actually have a tenant move into this space?
Well, it'll depend on what it is that tenant wants. It's conceivable that a tenant would say they don't really want to go in until the dam is actually gone, because that's been a great concern about
Sure.
the previous flooding there downstairs. So it's hard to say what the timeline would be as far as a restaurant opening goes, but as far as the building itself is concerned, I would say by June we ought to be able to turn over the upstairs apartments as well as downstairs to fit out for the restaurant, if we're at that stage.
Well, that'll be here before you know it.
Right.
Do you have a feeling that there's no question there's going to be a restaurant downstairs, as opposed to perhaps somebody's going to come in and blow you away with a retail store opportunity? Or is the way the space laid out such that really only a restaurant would want it, because you have, let's say, a kitchen design right in the center of the space?
I mean, certainly there are other uses that are conceivable there.
Mm-hmm.
Back at the turn of the 20th century, it was all retail. There were 3 stores there. A lot's changed since then. Without saying, who would be the user, the tenant there, I think in all likelihood it would be a restaurant, especially because the decks are behind the building and so appealing. And Exeter really is crying out for a restaurant in that location, as long as it's compatible with what we have here today.
Well, speaking of locations, literally right next door to that space is, if I remember correctly, an opening. Correct? There was a building that was formerly there. There's now a fence on the other side of that space. Do you know anything about what the future is for the space that's right next door?
Well, it's actually 2 properties down the street.
It's 2. It's not, okay.
Yeah, there was a fire several years ago and the building wasn't rebuilt, but the property there is permitted for a restaurant use of 90 seats. So that's one of the things that I've made sure that the town has in its calculations, that at some point someone could develop that restaurant and has been grandfathered in with 90 seats worth of parking. I see.
Now, getting back to your building, it looks like you're putting a new second floor on the space. Is that correct? Is what I see going on up there?
We're adding a second floor where the single story, about a third of the building is a flat roof single story, and what we're doing is putting on a second story to match the rest of the upstairs. So there will be 3 one-bedroom apartments upstairs.
So the new space above that would be a new apartment with waterfront views, correct?
Right.
You might want to let me know what that costs to lease. I might be interested in that.
Okay.
You know, it'd be very convenient to be able to just walk down a flight of stairs and be at a restaurant, sit up in my living room, look out the window, look at the library, look at the river. That sounds very, very convenient.
Feel free to stop by.
Okay, I'll do that. So this isn't your first attempt at redeveloping some space. Do you frequently get involved in redeveloping space that ultimately becomes restaurants, or just a range of businesses?
I have done a pretty wide range of businesses. I started out in commercial industrial development, doing power plants, eventually started in the shopping center business on large retail property, as well as some single family homes. But for the past several years it's really just been commercial, and when I saw the Loaf Ladle available nearby, I just thought, wow, this is a great opportunity to do something right here.
Relatively speaking, do you see a lot of commercial development going on now, or was 10 years ago a better time to be in commercial development?
In the Seacoast area, I think that the economy is pretty hot and people just find it a very desirable place to live and work. So I wouldn't say it's crazy busy, but certainly things are very healthy.
So if this project gets to the point where you can actually select a tenant in June, it sounds like the rest of your summer is going to be crazy in terms of just helping them getting the space fitted up so that they can have a restaurant in place by perhaps the fall. Do you have another project lined up directly after this, or do you kind of go back to square one and say, you know, I'm just going to sit back, and if something falls in my lap, I'll jump on it? Are you out there just aggressively pursuing that next big opportunity?
No, I don't go out looking for things. I pay attention to what's around, and saw this one literally driving by it, saw the for sale sign in the window. I'm not looking to add to the portfolio right now. It's just take things as they come. I've got plenty to do right now with my other work, so I'm happy just seeing this thing out to fruition.
I see. In general, what is your take on the number of restaurants that are being developed and opened here on the Seacoast? I would think that most people believe there's never been more restaurants on the Seacoast. I may be wrong in saying that, but it seems like there's a new restaurant popping up all the time. A new one opened up in Hampton 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like there's a lot of restaurants out there, which you might want to keep in mind when you're developing apartments, because you may not want to put kitchens in them anymore, right? People, when they want to eat, they go out to a restaurant, and they're going to have 5 restaurants that they can walk to from those apartments.
Well, there certainly are a lot of restaurants in the Seacoast, and in particular, Portsmouth is a little bit off the chart right now. Seems to be a miniature Boston in some ways. Exeter, I don't think is at all saturated. I think that people are seeing it as a good alternative to the busyness of some of the, for instance, Newburyport, Portsmouth, now even Epping has shown up on the radar as a destination. So The the downtown Exeter is very attractive, and I think that over time it's going to be a very good place to live, work, and play, which is really what modern day development's all about.
And interestingly enough, there's always plenty of parking in Exeter compared to Portsmouth, right?
Yes.
It's amazing. If I have an opportunity to go to a restaurant, they always seem full. Doesn't matter what the restaurant is, but anywhere I go, there's a restaurant, there's typically a line to get into the restaurant. And so that tells me there's got to be room for more restaurants. And if they do a good job, then there's always going to be a line out the door. So I find that as being very refreshing if I'm in the restaurant business. I'm sure there's a lot of downsides to it, and I wouldn't care to be involved in operating or owning a restaurant. But certainly there seems to be a tremendous amount of opportunity for people in the restaurant business. If you were starting a small business today and had a choice between retail versus a restaurant business, it almost seems, as crazy as it sounds, it's easier to get into the restaurant business because there's so much competition on the retail side. People can go online, buy whatever they're looking for, but restaurants are having a very hard time to replace them. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't have any desire to be in the restaurant business myself. It's a very, very demanding business. It's all-consuming. It is very interesting to meet with the different restaurant operators, many of whom have great reputations, well-deserved. So they each have a slightly different take on the business, but they're all very excited about the prospects for restaurants in this area. And I think that it's it's here to stay and it's here to grow.
Have you heard of any new restaurant concepts where people have come to you and say, hey, I'm thinking about opening a restaurant, where they're going to do something just completely different from what's going on in the local area, or is it pretty much the same pitch over and over again?
Well, it'll certainly have its own identity, but the trends these days are toward locally grown food, less processed foods, craft brewing, things like that, that tend to be less of the cookie cutter type of eating experience, and that's very much Exeter. I mean, look at the success of the Green Bean, the Blue Moon. These are great names to have, and to some extent, the more the merrier, because one draws on to another, and people like to have alternatives.
Well, it's interesting you reference the craft beer phenomena locally. It appears as though the Portsmouth area has almost become a destination strictly because of the craft beer phenomena. Could you foresee a town like Exeter becoming a destination for people who are just foodies that want to come and just eat different types of food, have the ability to walk through a downtown, be able to walk to a place like Swayze Parkway, and get that full New England / small town experience, and along the way have breakfast, lunch, and dinner in a 100-yard walk? Because we have the hotels now. We didn't have the hotels before per se. Now we've got a couple of hotels right, close to downtown.
I don't know. I think that is there a certain identity that are people looking for when they come to Exeter? I think Exeter's a well-known entity, the Revolutionary War capital, etc. Phillips Exeter Academy, and the beauty of downtown. I mean, the icon of the bandstand. So I don't think that something like the craft brewing, mecca of Rockingham County is what we're going to be, or anything like that. I think it's going to be a more well-balanced, semi-residential experience, and just maybe almost like a Portsmouth light.
Well, one of the challenges I see with the opening of all these restaurants is getting help. You're only as good as your help, regardless of what business you're in. And I can already foresee people who are opening up restaurants finding that right mix of people, willing to work in that business, because it is hard work. Finding the talent pool available without driving wages up in the area. Mm-hmm. Have you heard that from people in the restaurant business, that one of the reasons why they may choose a town to open a restaurant in versus a town that they don't open a restaurant in is because they just can't get the help?
Well, it's always a challenge to get the right people, especially in a service business like the restaurant business. So I don't think it's great difficulty for the right operators to get the right people and keep them, because they work so closely with their employees. That's something I've found in even our next door neighbor, 11 Water Street. You know, they work so closely with their employees that they foster a relationship, and there's a sort of a natural weeding out of the people that just aren't in it for the long term. But when you go into the restaurants in this area, generally you're greeted by some really good people and you want to stay.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining us on our show today. I'm looking forward to perhaps sometime in the fall taking a walk downtown, seeing a brand new restaurant. Maybe it's doing something a little different to get me excited about getting downtown. And would love to have you come back to our studio at some point in time if you come up with a new opportunity here in Exeter, so we can talk about that as well.
Very well. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Take care.
So the new owner of the Loaf Ladle hasn't decided who's going to start a restaurant in his building yet. So we thought we'd go out and ask some students what their thoughts were on what kind of restaurant should be in the Loaf Ladle space.
Well, if there was a restaurant here in town, like, we really need a Sonic. There's only one in Boston, so I would love to have a Sonic here in downtown, like a small version of it.
I know we already have a few of these in the area, but I think a new pizza place downtown, like directly downtown, would be a nice addition.
We also already have a Me and Ollie's, but probably another coffee shop type place would be good, because Me and Ollie's is always really crowded.
I'd like to see a really nice Italian restaurant with some nice fettuccine Alfredo here in Exeter to take the spot of Loaf Ladle.
I was thinking like a smoothie shop, like maybe a Jamba Juice, or not something as like, I don't know, like chain as that, but maybe like a local smoothie shop would be nice.
I would like to see it become more like a Panera, especially because of how good the mac and cheese is.
And I second the smoothie shop idea because there's no smoothie places in the area.
That's all for today on Next Stop Exeter. Look forward to seeing you soon.